Thank you, Your Worship. So the natural environment staff resource, so no specific funding included in the draft LTP. A few submitters addressed a range of natural environment and biodiversity related issues, including raising concerns about a gap in staff resource to champion these areas. And in some instances, they also called for the organisation to re-establish the natural environment team to support this work. So at this stage, nothing from the Mayor or Deputy Mayoral recommendation. Staff advice, a vacant position could be repurposed that focuses on championing the natural environment across the organisation. An additional $35,000 would be needed, as there's still a salary difference to make up. And once in place, this change, the effectiveness can be monitored and evaluated.
Okay, Sarah, Celeste and Tim.
Thanks. Two quick things. What's the current vacant position? So we wouldn't want to be disestablishing or switching from another valuable position in that team.
It's a policy advisor role. So we do have other policy advisors, so that would continue that function, and this would be just repurposing one of the policy advisor roles.
Okay. And the policy advisor in which space, or is it just a general?
It's in general.
Okay.
Yes.
So the other thing is that if we did this, I wouldn't want to position the job description to be a champion. It would be much more focused on sort of coordination and those kind of, I think we shouldn't necessarily be hiring people for championing and advocacy roles, if you like, but it would need to be in a focused natural environment coordination or something, but they'd need some sort of mandate. So what we're hearing is that there's not the coordination within the organisation currently.
So that was the intent, because that was picked up by a number of councillors that raised exactly what you're saying. Councillor Donovan, Councillor Coker, yourself, and a few others. So that's what John responded to.
Okay.
Yeah. So Councillor Templeton, it's definitely part of the position description that we were thinking about. That coordination was part of the role.
Thanks.
Tim?
Yeah, thank you. And I support this, but it comes back to my very first point that, we shouldn't be, we can hear and pass on what we hear with regards to what people feel the organisation needs in certain areas, but it does come back to the work that we need to do to combine everything into the natural environment to look at how we go forward to the Climate Resilient Fund, Accelerated Climate Adaptation, all that type of thing. We need to have one vision to go forward, and so this is part of that. If we're going to keep just chipping away on different things, we're going to have 3 and 20 processes for one major problem which isn't going away. So totally support it, but it does come back to that what we need from our staff is a combined front.
Okay, Celeste.
Says here there was a few submitters. My recollection was that there was quite a number of submissions on this particular issue, so I feel like perhaps that should read, there was an overwhelming mandate to address these issues. That might be a typo.
I can give you some actual numbers. There's
Yeah.
12
both of them.
raised reinstatement of the natural environment team, 4 who raised the number of waterway ecologists, and 17 who raised the biodiversity strategy. So that's, I don't know that.
4, so 8.
Quite a few organisations. So my question is this looking at re-establishing the natural environment and biodiversity team?
Team?
No.
There used to be a team in the last long-term plan that was disestablished to establish the climate resilience team.
Yes, the natural environment team got essentially replaced by the climate resilience, the climate team.
And the purpose of the climate resilience team, do they have an ecologist in that team currently?
Not in the climate team, no. The ecologists sit throughout the organisation, and for example, in the waterways teams, the parks teams, so they sit across the organisation. This would be an overview role, coordination, that sort of role.
And so this is around resources, quite important. In terms of the total number of FTEs we had when we had the natural environment biodiversity team, how many do we have now? Because we have, my understanding is we've had quite a substantial reduction in staff resource. So this, in the natural environment space specifically. So this, while I welcome this, wouldn't actually provide additional resource to do anything further on the ground.
As I said, they're spread across the organisation, those more technical roles and as such as ecologists. I think in the last comment, what I'm suggesting there too is that we do some monitoring and evaluation of what we need in this space. So that could be a future discussion, but at this stage, this is a first step in that direction.
I'll pass it on because I've got some more questions, but in terms of monitoring and evaluation, I think that the feedback is that actually we don't have enough resource to do any actual work on the ground. So we can do lots of monitoring and evaluation, but actually what we're looking at is actually delivering better outcomes in terms of biodiversity, and I don't think we have a resource currently to do that.
That's a wider discussion, and that would be looking at the staff resource across the council in that area.
Thank you. Victoria, please.
Thank you. 3 things. Picking up on what Celeste has just been referencing, aren't we waiting for a legislative steer or reform in this space in relation to some of the RMA reform? And perhaps the conversation might better occur after we've got that direction from central government in that space?
Yes, that would be helpful. Obviously, there's a lot of change in this space. Act's been repealed, national policy statements for Indigenous biodiversity, for example, on hold, those sort of things that would be useful to review after that.
Second thing is referencing the staff advice about the vacant position and repurposing it. Is it an option for us to perhaps continue along that with that idea, but just resize the role so that it fits within the current salary band that's already vacated, rather than having to have adding an extra 35k with a rate impact? That's one suggestion.
We felt that it needed a senior staff member to undertake this sort of role, to be able to operate across the organisation, have that expertise and that ability to do that. It would need to be a senior staff position rather than a more junior staff position.
But if it was about admin and coordination,
it's more than that.
It's technical knowledge, isn't it?
Yeah.
Maybe you reduce the hours and it's 0.8 instead of full FTE, just to fit within the current envelope of what we've got available to us. It's just a suggestion. And then the final thing was, it's just flagged up for me, is there any overlap here between what we're trying to achieve and what ECAN is tasked with doing, please?
We're not quite sure yet. We should be. There's no overlap at the moment because they don't operate within our organisation, but yes, they do operate in this space as well.
So should we just pass the ball totally to them and let them pick it up? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I think we need to be conscious of where that overlap is. So to say we're not quite sure, well, I think we need to be sure, because it could be double dipping in the same space.
For not a lot less, not a lot extra. Yeah. Melanie, please.
Is the aim of this position to oversee like the biodiversity strategy? Would that be their remit? Because that was sort of what I understood, like the core requirement of this is, and then with ecology. I mean, we've heard more ecologists are required as well to actually do the work, which is what Celeste said. But that was what instead of championing the natural environment, it's to see through the biodiversity strategy and make sure it's linked across different teams.
That was certainly the intention of part of the role, but we've broadened it out by saying natural environment, so it can do other things as well,
So
not just the biodiversity strategy.
What things would they be?
It's around the waterways ecology. It's all interrelated, so biodiversity and natural environment. So it was just broadening it out, so it did include more than just biodiversity.
Okay. I guess the way I understand this, and I'm not asking a question, I'm going to do it, but the way I understand this is this to work on council land. It's not ECAN's role. It's, ECAN's role is to oversee things and make sure we're doing the right work and do regional work, but our role is to look after our land and our rivers, so that's what we need to be actually working on, because there's not enough oversight across everything, particularly waterway, stuff growing in the waterways and things like that.
Pauline?
I was actually just going to say similar to what Mel said, and also that Environment Canterbury Regional Council and us, our staff work really well together. So there's no real waste of resources. We find efficiencies together. And despite the changes in the RMA from central government, I think this council's got a biodiversity strategy. We have goals to implement, and I think that's just because of the changes that occurred, we're now lacking in resource and staffing there. There has been talk that we do need some more freshwater ecologists, but I think that's something for the Chief Executive to look into and come back with a recommendation. So, I absolutely support this, so that's just clarifying. We've got our own really good programs here, and we've heard from people that they want to continue delivering those, and most of them are in partnerships, so we're getting really, really good benefit from it.
Yeah, I'd just like to actually just put it as a proposal. Let's put it in the mayor's recommendations if you're happy with that, Phil. Just to rather than create a whole new separate position, just to use it and do the little top up.
So just so I'm clear, John, this is for you. We had a group, and I shouldn't say dissolved it. We moved them into another group, climate change, to do similar work to what they were doing, or nothing at all.
Different work.
Different work altogether. Okay, so I just was hoping we weren't just adding one more in. So, okay, we'll try the next one, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So, the Biodiversity Fund. So, look, you can see the table there. The current year of line item funding is 400,000, and then it goes up a bit in each of the first 3 years of the LTP. Submitters supported the proposed retention of the Biodiversity Fund, highlighting the importance of the work the groups are doing, and what would be lost if it was removed. So if you look at the Mayor or Deputy Mayoral recommendation from the workshop last week, an additional 200,000 per annum for 3 years. And that is already included in the baseline numbers that Russell presented earlier on with that number when he gave the financials. A new amendment reduced the increase from 200 to 100 in years 1 to 3 of the plan. So it falls in the middle there between those top two lines. That's really sort of where we've landed at this point, and we'll take questions. So it was up 439, up 200, and now back 100.
But you actually have to follow on to the next slide now to give the reason for that.
I was going to let John talk to that, or Andrew, sorry.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the next slide starts to tell the full story.
Yes.
Perhaps then questions after that.
Okay, so the second slide tells the full story, so do we need to talk about the first slide if the second slide is sorted out?
Let's do the two slides as one
Then you
conversation.
can
Want
go
to do them as
backwards
one
and forwards.
conversation. So, all right, so then the Environmental Partnership Fund, sort of part two, if you like. The last year of the line funding is 350,000 in 23-24, and that is administered by the Regional Parks team. Some submitters supported the reinstatement of the fixed-term Environmental Partnership Fund, primarily to support environmental organisations working on public land in Port Hills, Banks Peninsula, the Avon, Heathcote, Styx River and the harbours. The Mayor's or Deputy Mayoral recommendation is to reintroduce funding as follows. 700,000, so that's 300 funded from the Capital Endowment Fund with a rates impact of 0.06%. In year 2, 700,000, again with a rates impact of 0.03%. And then year 3, 1 million, and that's another 0.03%. The staff advice is that there's better off funding in the budget to continue the grant for 2 years, and that amount is 500,000, and it could be split 250,000 year 1, year 2, and then 700,000 in year 3, and 300 funded from the Capital Endowment Fund, and that 300 has a rate impact of 0.05%. We can explain why, if you like, there's a difference of sort of the 0.5 on the 300 in year 3, but it's 0.6 in year 1, but it's really just the way the sort of the growth in the model works. You don't have to go through the mechanics, but the numbers are correct.
Yep. So I actually like that staff advice because it's using up some better off funding, and if we don't use it, we'll bugger off somewhere else. Celeste. It'll go somewhere, but it won't go here.
In terms
Celeste,
of
please.
the
Yes.
better off funding, is that unallocated better off funding, or is it funding that was allocated to?
It's allocated
No,
and approved.
Yeah,
that
it's
was
approved.
funding that was allocated to the regional parks team, so the decision was made by council.
So regional parks will lose out on the 500k, and we're moving it to this fund, offset it. Is that correct?
Sorry?
No,
So we're moving that. Sorry.
No, we're not moving any money. This is, as council made their decision, it's been allocated to
Regional
the Better
parks.
Off Funding program
So it's already in there.
that the regional parks are administering.
and this is where that
So
fund,
nothing has changed to the Better Off Funding decision.
and
That
just
funding is there.
to clarify, Andrew, the environmental partnership team in the previous years sat with the regional parks team as well. It's always historically sat
That's
there.
correct. So just for clarity, the biodiversity fund, the previous slide, is funding that is allocated to private landowners. This fund is administered by the regional parks team, and the grants go to groups that partner primarily with them on public land.
So just to clarify my question, the better off funding that was allocated regional parks, some of it was allocated to specific projects. So we've got a list of projects, 65k for this, 25. So will any of those things that have been put forward towards specific projects lose that funding in order to offset the rates impact?
No.
Right. Fantastic. Yes, I did have your hand. Yep.
So I'm a little confused. So was that better? This is a bit silly I'm asking this, but was that better funding going to go to in the same vein as environmental partnership? Because I haven't clearly understood.
The advice I've had is that this always was the intent of that Better Off funding, to extend the environmental partnership program.
In terms of time.
Yes, but after this year's finished.
So this isn't on top of the Better Off funding. This is
No.
using the Better Off funding
That's
as
already-
planned.
As planned.
And the good thing about what the staff advice is, they brought it into the first 2 years of where we would call the blimp of rates increase, and so I'd like to thank staff for actually thinking of this and doing it. So, Pauline.
Just to be clear, so 700 for year 1, 2, possibly 3, I don't know. Of that, 250 is better off funding, 300 capital endowment, and 150 rated for. Is that correct? Of the 700, 250 is the from better off, 300 from capital endowment, and 150 rateable. Is that right?
No, I my
No,
understanding.
they're two separate proposals. Rather than that supporting the recommendation, the staff advice is a different proposal, and the commonality is what has been proposed as the mayor, deputy mayors for year 1 would then drop into year 3. So it's quite a different proposal. But you could look at it to go, well, that's how we want to fund it.
Yeah.
That's
You might
up
want
to you
700. Staff are suggesting the 250 already there for better off funding instead of 700.
Melanie?
So,
We were asking
so
to say-
for the Environmental Partnership Fund, that has been 350k for the last 3 years. So you're saying that 250k, which is 100k less, was set aside to carry that on, and then there's other funding lines that are 350k plus others that are not to be funded either. So that 250 is a significant reduction to the money that goes to. That's what you're saying in the staff advice, right? Yeah. Well, I wouldn't support. I'll support the deputy mayor in this.
What about me?
I think we're waiting. I think we're waiting.
Staggering.
I think we're also waiting. I think we're also waiting for advice on whether the Community Waterways Partnership, which was 350, is now sitting in Waters
So,
Fund.
Ben, you can answer that one.
I'll have to check and just get back to you.
Is that, guys, has that given you any direction whatsoever? Hang on, Sarah's going to give us some
I
direction.
just check
Oh,
the
fine, Vic, sorry.
there's just the difference between the mayor and deputy mayor's recommendation and the staff advice. If there's already 250k allocated for the next 2 years, wouldn't you still have that as part of the mayor and deputy mayor recommendations and have a lower rates impact without using the capital
So
endowment
that's
fund?
what the
Yeah.
sense that some of you,
Yeah.
we're picking up, some
So
of you
it
would
would
like,
be-
so that'd be 450 from rates and the 250
Yeah.
from the better off.
Yeah, I think that would be good.
So that's a feel from some of, so we've got to.
But it means that those groups can carry on. Well, no, they are going to go on because they're going to be volunteering instead of.
So are you talking about wrapping them together, Mary? Is that,
Well, that's what we could do. That's an option. It's really going to be up to you what you put in your recommendation. But you've got I think you've got a sense of the feel of the room. You do have to bear in mind, and it's just a reminder that one of your resolutions was to ask staff to look for savings. So that's what we are doing.
Yes.
We're trying to reduce expenditure rather than increase it because of your resolution. And Andre reminded us about that, reminded you about that again at the last meeting. So we have consistently been doing this
Yes.
from the CE's recommendation for the draft right through. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just going to butt in. Could there be the 250k from the Better Off plus 300 from CEF and then another 150 on rates to do like a meld of all of this? These funds here fund the administrators of the groups that do the volunteer work, and if those people don't get the funding, then there's almost no point having biodiversity fund because that funds the projects that those administrators then administer to work with community. So this fund is almost more important than the biodiversity one in a way, although both of them are required.
so I'm just here.
Do you want to clarify, Andrew, about what the difference between the biodiversity and environmental funds are?
Sorry, can you just repeat that question?
So-
Got a bit confused there, sorry.
So the clarity of what the biodiversity fund's used for as opposed to the environmental
Oh,
part.
yeah, sure, sorry. The Biodiversity Fund certainly historically has been used to support external groups like Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, so working on adjacent land or private land, whereas this fund has primarily gone to much smaller groups that work a lot closer with our rangers.
Victoria had the next
So
question.
external land, public land. This one here is public land.
There is some overlap though, because some of those groups organise the covenants on the private land. Yeah.
Thank you. Right. How much clarity you got there, chaps?
We're still confused. All I want to see is somehow 700,000 in year 1 and 2.
Okay, so I think if I've got this right, I think that you throw the 250 you leave the 300 from CEF,
Yep.
you throw the 250 into it, which reduces the 700 down by 250. Is that what I'm hearing?
So
No,
can,
but-
can I just
no,
check
but
this?
you
So
rate for
200 for biodiversity. So let's bring those two funds together. So 200 for biodiversity and 400 for the environmental partnership, because there's 250 already in there.
No, it was 100 from the biodiversity.
100 for biodiversity now. Okay, 100 biodiversity.
This would only be an extra 50k.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because we were going to rate for 150, we'd only be rating for 100.
Yeah.
250
Ask you also-
better off, 300 capital endowment,
That's because
100 biodiversity, and a 50k rated. That would work.
Quickly write that down, Russell. When
No,
we
I don't get that. I don't think that's right. So you're saying 100, an additional 100k for biodiversity now.
From the biodiversity.
From the previous decision. I've got it.
He's got it.
Yeah, I get that, but that's still rate funded. An additional 100k is rate funded.
Yep.
Correct.
No, but the additional 200 was additional rate funding. Now you're dropping that to 100.
It's all rate funded.
But it's still 100.
So it would be 250 rates funded, and 300 from 250
Okay, well,
from.
we might be able to talk to this a bit more.
We'll
in
do
the-
the
Can
thing
I-
is I don't.
Can I have a go at getting
Yeah,
clarifying
give
this? Okay, so if we go back a slide, please. Well, sorry for being so pedantic, but what we're suggesting is that the previous workshop, I'm not allowed to use the word decision, but guidance was 200 on top of the existing LTP. That's now being reduced to 100.
100, yep.
And if we move to the next slide. Please.
Next slide.
Whoever's driving the slides, thank you. Okay. I think what I'm hearing from the Deputy Mayor is that she would like to see an option which is essentially the 250k that is already on budget and better off funding will support the funding required to reach 700k in year one,
Yep.
of which in year one, 300 will be from the Capital Endowment Fund. So there's 150, what's that, 550? 150k of rates will need to be added to that, and then et cetera, et cetera.
And the 100 from the biodiversity.
No, yeah, but they're balancing
That's in
out. We
there.
don't actually have to move it.
Okay.
We just
yep.
have a different rates impact.
Thank you,
to that-
Andrew.
To that.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Because we just need to clarify is I don't think it meets the criteria of capital endowment fund.
Oh, well, there we go.
isn't it? Because
So
the
it's
Environmental Partnership Fund was fully from the Capital Endowment Fund for the last 3
Yeah,
years.
the Environmental
And
Partnership
so
was.
was a Community Partnership Fund, another line, which was also 350k.
I think it absolutely
So they
perfect.
700k has been coming from the Capital Endowment Fund for the last 2 years for this stuff. So it does meet the threshold, or if it doesn't, we've done something wrong.
Can we just check with the review? Does it meet capital endowment fund or does it need to be rate funded?
Environmental Partnership Fund outcomes, similar to the existing fund, yes, it does. The biodiversity we'd have to check.
Right. Clear? Good. Victoria, last question.
We just seem to be swapping water out of buckets, money out of buckets. Is there any suggestion that these two should be rolled into one?
So the suggestion is the two grants come together. That would mean a rewrite of the terms of reference. Because one is for private land, one is for public land.
So I've got to leave it the way it is. Okay.
But you also said that the first one was for private land as well as adjacent land. So if it's as simple as private
Sorry,
land
it
and
was
public
my
land,
language.
Adjacent to public.
Sometimes it is adjacent. I was using the example of Banks Peninsula Conservation Trust, where we have adjacent land sometimes, private land and public land, so you have to work on the issue on both parcels.
One more.
but just so administratively, it's
Now?
not viable to roll them into
No,
one.
this is it. We're the events one. Yeah, let's have a break. Yeah.
So we're going to break now. After, no, do that one. Oh,
We've done
that's
that one.
Okay.
Done this.
Righto. Everyone's happy.
Yep.
We will now have a break. Okay, how long do you want, Harry?
Great idea. You want to break before?
It's just, yeah.
Come back half past.
Yeah, come back at 11:30, please.